Okay, year 11s, by this point you should have read through chapter 2 and 3 of Homage to Catalonia. They're pretty short chapters, as you can see, so I'd be surprised if you had any trouble getting through them. I'm just going to go through a few points of interest that may have arisen while you were reading those chapters, and remember that you're always welcome to read on as far as you'd like to read. If you want to go ahead and finish the book, that is a commendable impulse and one which I will encourage. There's a few little points of interest that I'll point out. It might take me 2 15-minute videos worth of information to get it all down. What I'd like you to do is when I switch over to the PowerPoint in a second, just make sure that you're in your exercise books taking notes where appropriate. There are a few things that are going to be mentioned in this video and in the next one that may well preempt some of the questions that the texts throw up. These books, both Homage to Catalonia and For Whom the Bell Tolls, presuppose a little bit of knowledge about the historical events that they depict, and so you do well to get in front of that and familiarize yourself with some of the stranger ideas that are going to crop up from time to time. All right, so we'll switch over to the PowerPoint. So as I said, you should have got to the end of chapter 3 today. It's a cold and rainy day and there's nothing much else to do, so why wouldn't you? I find the narration on the audiobook on YouTube to be pretty good, so that certainly makes it go a lot quicker. One thing that you have seen mentioned already, and which will be mentioned again, and which will in particular in For Whom the Bell Tolls be a big recurring theme, is the theme of bullfighting. Both Orwell and Hemingway spent enough time in Spain to familiarize themselves with Spanish culture. In fact, Hemingway wrote a book about Spanish bullfighting called Death in the Afternoon. If you're making good use of this material and if you're using it well, you'll be able to turn the recurring motif of bullfighting into some kind of metaphor. I think there's definitely a few different metaphors there that you can use to link the two texts together, that you can use to comment on the futility perhaps of the conflict, or the extent to which the two sides were unmatched and one side was playing with the other in the way that a matador plays with the bull. You can comment on the blind enthusiasm that the bull has for charging the rag. You can even use the red of the rag as a metaphor for, you know, the encroaching socialist ideas that kick off this conflict. So there's all kinds of treatments of bullfighting that you can get stuck into. The next thing that you're going to need to be aware of is Spanish geography. It's fun to look at maps, but it's also informative. So it's worthwhile familiarizing yourself with a map of Spain. The geography hasn't changed, obviously, in the last 70 odd years. Some of the formal boundaries have. This, I believe, is a more recent map of Spain, but it's the clearest one I could get. You're more than welcome to, and I've previously shown you, to look at a map of Spain from the 1930s to see, particularly after the start of the Civil War and the Revolution, to see what the political situation was there at that time. You can get a bit of a sense of the actual physical geography of the country by looking at the political geography of it too, because sparsely populated or mountainous regions tend to turn into front lines between the more populous centres around Barcelona and Madrid and elsewhere. when we look at Spain, I want you to take note of the position of Catalonia there on the northeastern edge, right up against France and the Mediterranean. To the west of Catalonia, you can see the province of Aragon. Just to the northwest of Aragon, you can see Navarra. Now, Navarra is an interesting case and kind of, to me, helps us to understand the complexity of the conflict a little bit more. Navarra was an area that had very conservative tendencies. It was very Catholic. It was very pro-monarchy. It was very, in some ways, anti-trade unions and things like that. But it was also an area that had historically its own language, its own dialect, and its own regional identity. And that goes for the Basque region that you can see in blue just to the northwest of Navarre. Now, these two areas, because they've got such a conservative culture, you would expect to be on the nationalist side of the conflict, but their willingness to maintain Spanish conservatism was outweighed by their enthusiasm for independence, and so they aligned themselves with the faction who promised them to be independent once the fighting was over, and that was the Republic. But we'll cover more on that later on and on Monday. So Orwell was fighting on the Aragon front, and the province of Aragon was kind of split in half between Republican and nationalist forces, and the front line was a ragged thing that kind of extended along the Castile northern border there all the way to the sea. All right, a big theme that you're going to see, and which Orwell explores pretty effectively in these first 3 chapters and beyond, and certainly later in the book when he is wounded and returns to Barcelona to convalesce, you'll see the peak of disorganization and confusion. Disorganization is a big thing, not just in this book, but in other books about the Spanish Civil War, and not just in the fictional books, but in the history books as well. A good example of that arises pretty early on. We see in chapter 2 that Orwell very dryly relates about how his unit's rifles only arrive at the front 3 days after the men themselves, which means that they're manning their section of the front to a greater or lesser extent unarmed for that period. And Orwell, kind of obliquely comments that the only thing that in that situation that's stopping his Spaniards from getting overrun is the fact that the people on the other side are also Spaniards. So there's a lot of commentary about the character of the Spanish people. They're characterized in both Homage to Catalonia and For Whom the Bell Tolls as passionate and argumentative and tempestuous and brave. And that's a deliberate contrast with the unseen enemy that sort of lurks on the periphery in the form of the Germans and, to a lesser extent, the Italians, who have got superior training, weaponry, organisation, and in particular, in the Germans' case, discipline. And it's that metaphor of the bull again. It's the patience, discipline, and technique of the matador. In this case, I guess you could argue representing the nationalists, confronting the unfocused energy of the bull, representing the Republic and the various leftist factions. All right, speaking of the bull, in this book we hear a lot about the militia system, and it's an idea. It's a very Spanish idea. I think Orwell takes great pains to point out, having this fairly confused mess of militias whose job collectively is to defend the Republic. Each major political movement had its own armed wing, and this is a bit of a feature of failed and failing states around the world and throughout history, when your political parties start developing their own armed forces, you know that your country is probably taking a turn for the worse in some ways. It was true in Ireland at the beginning of the 20th century. It's true in Somalia. It's arguably true in the United States today as well. So the Republican forces, when we hear about the Republic and its army, and Orwell makes some references to something they're putting together called the Popular Army, which just means not that it was, liked by everyone, but that it was representative of everyone. And the Popular Army was an attempt to unify all the militias under a single command. All right, so that concludes the first part of this video. In the next segment, I'm going to be talking about the various movements, the various parties, what their role was in Spain at this time in history, what their role was in relationship to Orwell's and Hemingway's experiences in Spain too. So stay tuned.